international partners in terms of cutting off some of the money that organized crime would benefit from some of this traffic in stolen vehicles. So I always take advice from the Commissioner of the RCMP and the Border Services Agency in terms of what the government can give them in terms of additional resources or tools or authorities to work with their partners in this space. I talked regularly with colleagues in provincial governments and some provincial premiers in my role as Intergovernmental Affairs Minister around what we can do in this area. I am very encouraged by some of what my colleagues at Transport Canada are talking about in terms of vehicle standards. I had a conversation in this area with the U.S. Homeland Security Secretary when I was in Washington some weeks ago around the integrated nature of the vehicle manufacturing sector in Canada and how we might work with American partners to ensure that some of the latest technologies could be included also that would discourage criminals from attempting to steal vehicles or make it harder. So we're always looking for good ideas, and we'll continue to do more and more to make sure that Canadians feel secure in this increasingly worrisome context.
Great. Thank you. So I'm glad you touched on that point, actually, because Mayor Patrick Brown of Brampton has gone on record on CP24 to state that there is a leaky bucket, and he claims that the leaky bucket is the Port of Montreal. And he highlighted some issues with scanners and the timeline of procuring those scanners. Could you just comment on perhaps some of the resources that we've provided to different law enforcement agencies, including the CBSA, to help target this problem?
Mr. Chair, thank you to Mr. Gahir and his colleagues also from communities near the one he represents who have spoken to me. I had a conversation with our colleague, Mr. Sidhu, about this again yesterday as well. Mayor Brown has been an effective advocate for his community and for his regional police services in this area. It has been, I know, for the RCMP, a privilege to work with the Peel Regional Police, with the Toronto Police Service. In some successful interdiction operations, the Border Services Agency plays a key role here. One of the challenges, people understandably focus on the Port of Montreal or other places where these vehicles, stolen vehicles, might be exported. I am told that 30 to 40% of the vehicles that are stolen are in fact resold in Canada. So it's not a perfect solution to choke off the export points only. We need to work also with police of jurisdiction, local police, to hopefully prevent these vehicles from being stolen or arrest the persons that are stealing these vehicles at the point of arresting them. It's the most inefficient and expensive way to deal with the problem at the very top of the criminal activity when they're being exported. We're going to obviously give the CBSA the authority and the instruments they need to do the work that we expect of them, but we also need to do it in a sort of concerted and coordinated way with local police. That's the most effective way to bring these numbers down. That's what Canadians want, and their concern about the increasingly violent nature of these offenses, as I mentioned, is something that we share and will want to attack in collaboration with partners as well.
Thank you, Mr. Gahir, and that brings the first part of our committee meeting today to an end. I want to thank you, Minister, for appearing and your testimony. We're going to take a 5-minute suspension. Thank you.
So I am moving this motion. The motion has been moved. And, in Surrey, police were brought in to redirect traffic because of the huge amount of Canadians that were seeking food. We have food banks in Montreal where police have been directed off the very important work that they're doing on our streets to protect Canadians to provide crowd control at these food banks. The cost of food is going up in Canada, and we know that on April 1st, there will be a 23% increase in the carbon tax in this country. And that's not just in the provinces where the federal backstop is in place. Every province, even with their own carbon tax regime, has to increase this price to meet the federal requirements. And at a time like this, when inflation is roaring, when food prices are escalating, in some cases over 10%, in some categories, Canadians can no longer afford food, and we can no longer afford to see our police officers that are overstretched across jurisdictions, not just the RCMP, having to go to food banks to provide crowd control to protect Canadians and protect food banks. because of these rising costs of food. And so with that, I'll move my motion, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Ms. O'Connell, please.
Thank you, Chair. I move to adjourn debate,
So moved.
and I'll ask for a recorded vote.
Recorded vote.
Ms. O'Connell,
Yes.
Mr. Biddle,
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon,
Yes.
Mr. Gay,
Yes.
Monsieur Lightbound,
Oui.
Mr. Shipley,
No.
Mr. Lloyd,
No.
Mr. Mutz,
No.
Mr. Kirk,
No.
Madame Michaud,
Oui.
Monsieur Julien.
Oui.
Yeas pour 7, nays contre 4. 4.
All right, so we're going to continue, and it's Ms. O'Connell up for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I want to start, Commissioner Duhaime, in terms of sexual harassment and sexual assault within the service and the RCMP, can you please update us on what you're doing in your leadership to ensure that the workforce within the RCMP are protected, in particular with women, and that when there are instances or cases where there is sufficient evidence of actual an assault or violence, that these cases are also being referred to local police for charges and not simply a member loses their job and doesn't face consequences that a civilian would, for example.
So, Mr. Chair, let me give you a few numbers on the sexual harassment side of things over the last couple of years. In 2021, there's 48 out of 373 harassment files, and out of those, 12 did not meet the definition of harassment and violence. 16 at least had one allegation that met the definition of harassment. 18 were withdrawn by the principal parties. And I must stress that our harassment process is independent, which is not, it's independent from the RCMP. The investigator is independent. The decision maker is a member of the RCMP who's presented the investigation. And out of the total file, there's one that's still undergoing an investigation. I want to make it perfectly clear. One complaint is too much. One complaint, the damage in that unit's already been done. We want to get to a point where we don't get any more complaints. And the stats for 2022 are very similar. But the point is that I expect that every employee engaged in the organization respects and adheres to the core values of our organization. And we have measures in place to address with regular members. We have a code of conduct, which there's been some really, really great work that's been done over the last couple of years, where we're revamping the whole code of conduct to bring it back, to bring it to what is expected from Canadians when we are dealing with the code of conduct. So we're being more aggressive on everything to do with sexual harassment and sexual assaults in the organization.
Thank you. Director Vignon, similar question to you with your organization and the members serving. There was recent media reports too that there are challenges in terms of reporting given the nature of some of the work that CSIS members might do in terms of protection of identity, which all makes sense. But how are you ensuring that within the service that you're protecting employees and ensuring that the nature of their work doesn't prevent or create some sort of loophole in terms of reporting and the protection of members of the service, in particular women in this case, to be able to report, and obviously then the additional work to make sure it's a safe workplace for everyone?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. And I welcome this question by the member. This is a very serious issue. I have to say that I don't want this to become a bumper sticker because everybody says it, but when we say that it is inappropriate and, it will not be tolerated, I can tell you that it's exactly the case at CSIS. I have made personal commitment to create an ombudsperson to allow for people, even though we have very robust processes inside, and that's been recognized recently by the Federal Court of Appeal, that our processes internally to investigate are adequate to address these issues. But it's more important to go over and above that. So we'll have a separate person, an ombudsperson, to look into this. I've also committed to report publicly, and